So I think I was asked to give this speech because I grew up in Fort McMurray, Alberta, and I've spent my entire career working on sustainable energy transition projects. I'm the president of a small geothermal development company called Terrapin Geothermics. I co-founded Student Energy. I've spoken at the UN on multiple occasions, and I still support some pipeline and oil and gas development. I'm a walking, living, breathing contradiction of energy. I hold the distinct honor of being somebody who has both had a Rebel Media hit piece call me a secret NDP agent, and I've been called an oil and gas lobbyist on numerous occasions. And I think the reason that I hold these seemingly contradictory viewpoints on energy is I just think of energy as being fundamental. Energy at its core is really, really simple. Energy is work. We as human beings have figured out a phenomenal number of ways to make energy do work for us. We use the work of gravity through hydroelectricity. We use the work in natural gas to heat our homes. We put up wind turbines to capture the work of the wind to bring us electricity and all of its inherent benefits. The contradiction in energy is that we never debate, do we need these things or not? These conversations never center around, should we heat our homes or should we use electricity? The contradictions in energy come from the fact that really in the past 10 years, we've started to understand that energy is trade-offs. Energy has consequences. If you use more fossil fuels, you're going to increase CO2 levels. If you frack for natural gas, it's going to leak and you're going to cause more earthquakes. If you rapidly deploy electric vehicles, you're going to have lithium ore mines pop up globally. And despite batteries being inherently good, the environmental and social impacts of these mining operations are no different than any other mining operation on Earth. And this collective global awakening around climate change has led to us try to become problem solvers. A lot of the suggestions and solutions are us trying to find that silver bullet. And a bit of my message is that there is no silver bullet on energy. Almost every single solution or idea you can come up with as far as how we make this transition has consequences to it. You always find people that say, yeah, but to any idea in energy because they're valid criticisms. And I'll walk through a few examples. So the suggestion of just deploy more wind. Well, wind is inherently unstable. In Alberta, you're just as likely to have 10 megawatts of wind on the grid as you are to have 600 megawatts of grid on the grid. Okay, just deploy more batteries. Well, batteries are still incredibly expensive. The conversations are that maybe in the late 2020s, we start to get to a point where we're reaching grid parity. Even in solar-friendly California, the Rocky Mountain Institute expects that you need grid prices to double and for us to wait until 2038 before solar plus batteries reach parity with the grid prices right now. Fine, throw up your hands and just develop all the oil we can. Yeah, but in Canada, we have no more export capacity. We can't actually get our product to market anymore. Fine, screw pipelines, let's just ship it by rail. Well, we're doing that, and it's actually one of the most environmentally unfriendly ways we can ship our product to market. You have about 4 times the incidence of spills and leaks when you ship something by rail than if you use it via pipelines. Let's do that same exercise globally. So we need to end coal use globally. Yeah, but most developing nations, their primary source of power generation is coal right now. In India, they're using more coal than any other form of power generation by far. Well, they need to transition using renewables. Well, India's power grid has doubled since 2000 and is going to triple still by 2040. They need every electron they can get. Well, maybe they just can't use energy like we do in North America. Yeah, but they don't. Most developing nations use a fraction of the energy that we do in North America. And you have to remember that energy is fundamental. It's a fundamental part of our modern society. It leads to health, happiness, prosperity, and development. This is an example in the Central African Republic where they have to use a kerosene fridge to keep vaccines cold for small children because they don't have a stable grid to provide them with electricity. Should they not be allowed to use that form of energy just because it has higher emissions than other forms? Yeah, but this makes me feel overwhelmed, and it should. I think that one of the issues we have at these types of events is the optimist in us tries to take over. We think that the innovators and that the problem solvers in our world are going to come along and the new widget is going to rocket to the top of the market and suddenly solve all of our problems. The issue is that that's not happening. Despite all of the policy objectives, despite all of the discussion around climate change, we are relentlessly marching to 450 parts per million of CO2 and far beyond. We as a global society right now are using 97 million barrels of oil a day. We have increased our oil consumption as a global society by 5 million barrels of oil in the past 45 months. And I want that number to sink in a little bit and provide some context. So the entirety of Canada's oil sands industry produces around 2.5 million barrels a day of oil. Our global society has added more than double that in consumption in the last 45 months alone. In an era of fake news, to say that we're not using more of this product than ever before is simply false. So this is when I say I support some oil and gas and pipeline development. This is the reason. The world is demanding more of this product than ever before, and we're starting to ship it in really unimpressive and unintelligent ways. Again, oil by rail is one of the worst ways we can ship this product to market. The flip side of this, and sorry, one more point is, with this capacity constraint, we as Canadians are collectively leaving about $10 billion a year on the table. Maclean's estimates that between the lack of capacity and the price differential that that causes for our product, we're leaving north of $10 billion a year on the table as a society. The flip side of this whole argument, though, has been, in my opinion, the absolutely tone-deaf approach to development from our pipeline industry. We're screaming about tax revenue and jobs to an audience that's screaming about habitat protection and climate change and watershed. And newsflash to the pipeline industry, you're losing. The environmental movement in Canada has done a phenomenal job of communicating their message, rallying supporters, and demonstrating their beliefs to their audiences. I put this deck together a week ago, and we've already crossed another pipeline off this list for development in Canada. And I say this routinely when we get into these sorts of debates, that an economic answer to an environmental question is the wrong answer. If somebody's asking about habitat and watershed and climate change, answer about habitat and watershed and climate change. So for those of you keeping score at home, we currently have an energy system that is using more fossil fuels than ever before, is leaving billions of dollars on the table, is nowhere close to meeting our Paris targets, and has left environmentalists and pipeline activists deeply upset. We really nailed it, Canada. I sometimes think that maybe we've crossed an invisible line on energy where maybe we can no longer be having these conversations of environment versus economy as separate. We as Canadians have the right to set the rules of the game. We can choose to demand out of development whatever it is that we want to demand out of development. What if instead of having this consistent debate of should we develop the economy or should we protect the environment, we get to a point where development leads to protection of the environment? What if we set terms that require new mega energy project development to lead to renewable energy deployment? I know that sounds idealistic, but what if you want your 890,000 barrel a day Trans Mountain pipeline expansion? Cool. It comes with a requirement that you need to deploy 890 megawatts of wind. Does it feel good protesting a project that's going to add nearly a gigawatt of green power and at the same point in time create tens of thousands of jobs? What if we as Canadians pick up some of the money we're leaving on the table, pick up some of the $10 billion a year we're leaving on the table, and use that to fund a very direct and literal transition to a more sustainable energy system? So where do we go from here? I've been part of a fascinating experiment for the past couple years in Alberta called the Energy Futures Lab. We're trying to be a bit of a breeding ground for these sorts of conversations where we bring together strange bedfellows from all walks of life, all industries and political stripes to try to answer some of these what-if questions. What if we could get new products to market faster by allowing new technology to engage with industry veterans in a policy lab? What if we could use carbon as an asset in manufacturing and processes? What if instead of forgetting about our existing oil and gas workers, we make them part of a just and lasting transition? What if every deep, hot gas well in Canada had a second life as a renewable energy asset? This is a problem that my company, Terrapin Geothermics, is working at every single day. What if we all had a place we could go where we could talk about this stuff without getting yelled at? Right now, the currency of communication in Canada around energy is finger pointing and blame. And I have a call to action for everybody in this room. Hold your nose. We're at a point right now where we're not achieving any of our objectives on energy. We're over on our Paris targets, we're under on our economic targets, we're under on our export capacity, and we're not meeting our renewable energy deployment objectives. What if we could all hold our noses a little bit, sit across the table from people that we don't like what they have to say and we don't like what we want to hear, and we actually turn the contradictions in energy into new collaborations in energy? Thank you.